Good morning, New Life. Pastor Troy here. I'm standing in front of the Covington campus, and I want you to know I walked in this morning absolutely overwhelmed of the favor of God. Just New Life, what God is doing right now. Maybe you're visiting with us or coming in for the first or second time or newer to New Life. What a special time to be here. The hand of God, the favor of God. I believe what Seattle needs and what the Northwest needs and what this region needs is a church that will be revived, a church that will move forward for the glory and honor of God, a church that will have a moonshot. So good to have you here today. So many things happening. The opening of Covington campus, it's amazing. We also have the podcast starting tomorrow, launching tomorrow. Every New Lifer, I'm going to ask, even if you're not a person that listens to podcasts or watches podcasts, will you do it? Will you help us get the word about theology and what God is doing there? You don't want to miss it. And then we are starting the Gospel of John. For the next 15, 16 weeks, we're going to deep dive into the Gospel of John. I want to encourage you to invite a friend. I want to encourage you not to miss one Sunday. I want to encourage you to take the Mark It Up notes, brand new Mark It Up notes, use them. Let's all dive in together. At the end of the day, New Life, while it's exciting what's happening with buildings and podcasts, it's about people. Our mission is to lead people into a fully devoted relationship with Jesus Christ. In other words, I want us to be devoted to the passion of God, to the heart of God. So let's jump into the Gospel of John together. Pastor Brian Jenkins, Dr. Brian Jenkins is up to preach. Let's give him again as Pastor Brian comes and opens up the Gospel of John.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? It's awesome to be here. Thanks so much. You saw all that great stuff about Covington. I want to say hello to all of our campuses this morning, everyone watching online, Softer Sundays, Normandy Park, Covington family. I had such a great time being with you over there already this morning, and obviously everyone watching online as well. We are continuing starting, as Pastor Troy mentioned, in this study in the book of John. I'll get to that in just a second, but I do want to point out a couple of things that we're also launching today, one of which are these Mark It Up notes, our Mark It Up notes. So there's this thing called taking notes in church, and we did it back in the last century, but no, we actually did it here at New Life not too long ago, and just with some things changing, but we brought this back. We want to encourage you, take this out. How do you use it? It's very simple. If you see something on the biblical side, you can underline it, highlight it, just make a note of it. And then if it's on the screen, you write it down. That's as easy as it is. It's called Taking Notes in Church. Congratulations. There's also a place on the back that I just noticed earlier today where you can reflect and sort of say, hey, how can I apply this to my life? So make sure you're using this. If you don't have a copy, they're at the back of all of our auditoriums and available for you. You also heard Pastor Troy mention that Theology Threads. Theology Threads starts tomorrow. It drops, it launches. Both launches and drops. So I don't know. Actually, I think that's probably a really horrible thing. No, we're going to get it started tomorrow. We're looking forward to it. One of the reasons we want to encourage you to subscribe to it is how it will interact even with our Sundays. So many times you'll start hearing us reference the content of a Theology Threads episode in the sermon. And so we want to make sure that you get that this is really a way that we can work together. So there's also that, and there's also the idea that's really meant also as shareable content for you to really reach out. So for example, tomorrow's episode that's going to be launching on belief and the importance of it. Maybe you know someone who's struggling in faith. Maybe you know someone who's asking big, deeper questions about Jesus or about God in general. It's a great opportunity to share this with somebody. It's intended for you to not only for it to speak to your own life, but to share someone as well. Well, we are starting the series John, Heaven on Earth, and we'll get a little bit more to the meaning of that tag here in a moment. But whenever we start a series at New Life, there's a couple of things we want to encourage you to do. One of the things we want to first ask you to do is to attend every week. Attend every week. And I know you may be thinking, attend every week. Yes, we actually do this every week. Every Sunday we're here. We come back same times. It's really pretty cool. We like to get together. But yeah, make sure you're here over the next little bit. We're actually going to be doing this for a while, about 15, 16 weeks, as Pastor Troy said. So make sure you're here every week. That way you get to hear the whole story. You get to hear the whole thing laid out. The second thing we encourage you to do is to read the book of John. You may say, well, I already read the book of John. Read it again. Maybe you say, well, I watched The Chosen. It's not the same. I'm just going to tell you that right now. You're like, oh, you're one of those guys. I actually think the book's way better than the show. Actually, I do think, never mind. But I encourage you, and if you've already read it, read it again. If you read it, maybe you say, well, I've read it, try a different translation of Scripture, read it in a different way, journal alongside, but just really start to consume the book of John. I really encourage you to do that. Oftentimes in discipleship, people will say, oh, the book of John's great for new believers. And I'm going to tell you something. The book of John is great for every believer. There is such truth and depth and power in this book. Really want to encourage you to be a part of it. And then finally, to invite a friend, just have someone come along this journey with you and just say, hey, we're looking at ideas and concepts at our church each Sunday morning. I'd love to have you here to be a part of it. So let's do that. Let's get ready for what God has to say for us today. And the way I want to start our conversation about John is to point out that my family and I, we lived away from the Pacific Northwest for just under 3 years, and we've recently moved back last November. And one of the things we've had to get used to that's a little different is all of the different, we have 3 different trash cans. We have 3 different trash cans in our home. Before, it was like, hey, where do I put this car battery? Oh, they're next to the compostables, and the burning tire, just, where the baby is, just you put it all over there. That's kind of what it was. But now it's like, no, this goes here, and that goes here, and this goes here. And every once in a while, something will be there that's not supposed to be there, right? You look in the recycling, and there'll be something that's not supposed to be in the recycling. Or even worse, you look in the garbage, and there'll be like a soda can. And I know you're judging me for drinking soda, but I don't care, because you're already judging me because I don't recycle well. So I'll be fine. But in the soda can, it'll be in the normal garbage. And the question then comes, wait a second, how did this get here? And everyone will say, I don't know. And my wife, who is really trying to get us all on the same page with this, who's really working hard to make sure that we're doing what's right and what's good for the environment and what's really the healthy thing to do. And she'll say, well, hold on a second. Someone had to have put this soda can here. And everyone will say, was it your soda can? No, it wasn't mine. And she'll look around, and eventually the dogs are like, it wasn't ours either. Right? Sorry, I just had a really bad. We only drink soda pop. Okay. Sorry, I had to say it. It gets lodged in there and it can't get out. But she'll say, well, how did this get here? And you realize at that point the basic laws of how the universe works. Something can't be somewhere unless somebody put it there. We all understand that's how the universe works, right? Like if a can just doesn't spontaneously appear in the non-recyclable garbage. Someone had to put it there, right? Whether it's the can, someone had to put it there. Whether it's the socks on the floor, someone had to put them there. All the stuff the dog leaves on the floor, I know I didn't put it there. Someone had to put it there. And when we look at our lives and we look at how we're here and what is this here and how was all this here, and we were celebrating with Covington this morning and their new building, someone had to design it, construct it, and put it there. And so it makes us beg the question, who put this here? Like, who put all this here? And I know some of you say, well, it's easy, it's God. It is that easy for some of us, but for others it isn't. Because when you ask that question, who put this here, there's really only 2 kind of outcomes. It's a pretty binary question. Either nothing put this here, or something/someone put this here. That's it. There's only 2 possible realities to that. And there are a lot of people, very smart people, very well-meaning people who are far smarter than I am, who will say, well, there's nothing behind what put us here. There's a scientist who does a TED Talk, a physicist, his name's Terence McKenna, and he once made the statement that modern science is based on the principle, give us one free miracle and we'll explain the rest. The one free miracle is the appearance of all the mass and energy in the universe and all the laws that govern it in a single instance from nothing. So even the scientist has to say, well, there's a reason that stuff is here. We have to ask the question, who put this here? And if there's nothing that put all this here, then the other question of that is, well, then what's the point? If there's no intent, if there's no purpose, if there's no meaning, then we are left to discover and devise and derive our own meaning, which means that the only meaning that matters is the meaning that matters to me, which is all great and fine until your meaning and my meaning need the same parking spot. Now, our meanings have come into conflict with each other, right? And let's hope it's just a parking spot. What if it's a political policy? Or what if it's a moral issue? Or what if it's how I spend my money? Or what if it's how I should treat other people? Or what if it's how I should treat people who are different than me? And all of a sudden, your meaning and my meaning come into conflict. And now when our meanings are in conflict with each other, we ask, you should be doing this. And then the other person will say, we should be doing this. And the question comes, says who? Which leads us to our next truth, which is either no one put us here or someone put us here. And if someone put us here, we better figure that out. Because the problem doesn't come in living as though someone put us here. The problem is this: we often live as though nothing put us here. And you say, what do you mean? I'm not a bad person. I'm not an immoral person. That's not what I'm talking about. There are many times even in my life where I live like there's no one out there really in control. And so I have to worry that control into existence. I live as though there's no one out there that's going to hold me sometimes accountable. You live out there, someone's going to hold you accountable. We live as though there's nothing out there, so I have to find my meaning in my job. I have to find my meaning in a relationship. I have to find my meaning in what area of town I live in. I have to find my meaning in how well my kids do in soccer. I have to find my meaning. And anytime I do that, even if I say there's a God in heaven, I'm living as though there's not. And so that tension comes from this. What do we do with this? It's really sort of terrifying, right? When I was a kid, I used to always get lost in the department store. And I'd be wandering around looking like I was all lost and alone. And I'm so small, where's my dad? You know, all this sort of stuff. And I'd walk around looking for somebody. And my mom would find me and they would say, hello, Pat, here's Brian again, you know. And so we go through all of that and we wonder, why are we here? Who put us here? But ultimately, it's in that moment or in any moment. And that's why many of you have found your way to church today. Many of you have turned perhaps towards religion for meaning. You've said, hey, we can't do this anymore. We can't keep going the way we're going. Our family can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep living this way. I have to find something else. So why is this important? Why is this a necessary conversation? Why do we start such a powerful, wonderful gospel like John with this sort of discussion? It's because this is how John starts his story of Jesus. He wants us to understand from the very beginning and make no mistake about who Jesus is. So this is what I really want us to understand as we move forward in the biblical text today. The one thing I really want you to grasp with, and if you don't hear me say anything else today, just remember this one specific fact, is that as Christians, we believe that Jesus created everything. We believe that Jesus created everything. And we're going to spend the rest of our time together meditating on that one idea and what it means for you, what it means for me, and what it means for the world around us. John chapter 1, verse 1, starting in verse 5, it says this: in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, speaking of the Word. Through him, still speaking of the Word, all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Now, there are more verses in your Mark It Up notes today, and we realize that I'm only going to be focusing on the first 5. But what I want you to do is, if you have your Mark It Up notes, take it and look down at verse 14. And I just want you to either underline it, circle it, be aware of that. I'm going to bring it into context here in just a few moments. When we talk about the book of John, we're talking about a book that was written in the late 1st century AD, probably anywhere from between 40 to 60 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. He's writing primarily to a Greek audience. Many scholars think that it would have been to the Greek audience in Ephesus, which is in modern day Turkey. Essentially, he's writing to people who don't have the religious background of Judaism. He's writing to people who have more of a pagan or pluralist or pantheistic religious background. So he can't deal with some of the preconceived or presuppositions that like Matthew and Mark get to deal with. He's got to tell the story to people who have no context. So rather than starting with Jesus, he starts in the beginning. And what he's talking about is this, and really why we call it heaven on earth. One of the main themes, the big priority power of the book is this. It's the invasion of the power of eternity into the everyday life of humanity. The walking incarnation of divine power is Jesus Christ. It is literally heaven on earth. And I know sometimes when we see a title like that, we think it's about making the earth a better place. No, it's about the heaven explodes. Heaven saturates every moment, every day of our lives. So we're going to take a look today at 4 critical realities, and I'm going to say them to you, and then we'll follow them on the screen. But we're just going to look at the clues to who Jesus is, the identity of Jesus, the work of Jesus, and the triumph of Jesus. The clues to Jesus, the identity of Jesus, the work of Jesus, and the triumph of Jesus. So let's look at these, starting with the clues to Jesus. John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word. In the beginning was the Word. Now this is interesting because we think word as in a bunch of letters created to make a thing that has meaning. I need you to step back from that, and then I'm going to give you a crash course in Greek philosophy in about 45 seconds. So if you're ready, awesome. If you're not ready, just close your eyes. And someone will wake you up when we're done. When we talk about the Word, we think, oh, Jesus is the Word of God, like the thing written down, okay? When they talked about the word, both in Hellenistic and Greek philosophy and in Jewish philosophy, they believed that the word was this thing, and the Greek word is the logos. And the logos was the thing that drove the universe. It was the reason and the power and the thing that animated the universe. Everything in the universe came and was driven and sustained by what they called the logos, right? So it was this big, huge power that sort of pushed everything forward. It was, to quote another great philosopher, it was an energy field made of all living things that surrounds us, binds us, penetrates us. It binds the universe together. Yes, that was my impression of Obi-Wan Kenobi. But in essence, that's kind of what they thought the logos was. That it was, in essence, it was this thing behind them. And John doesn't say you're wrong. John says, in the beginning, the logos was there. You're right-ish. And I'm going to introduce you. You'll hear it a lot on Theology Threads. You'll hear it a lot in this church whenever I'm up here. I'm going to introduce you to the power of ish. Because it's in those three letters, ish, that a lot can get done. Because when you're talking to someone about what they believe and they just say, well, I just send positive things out to the universe and I believe that the universe only wants the best for me. You're not wrong-ish. Well, I just believe in putting good vibes, and if you put good vibes out, vibes will return to you. Okay-ish. I believe that there are souls trapped in volcanoes, and that if we release them, okay, you're just wrong. I'm just going to tell you that we're going to move that person over here. There's no ish there. That's just wrong. But we say all these things, and what John is saying is that this logos was there. This thing you think was there. So Jew and Gentile, religious and secular, all understood that something was behind everything and driving all creation forward. And John says, I know that guy. He's my friend from work. Like John is saying, yeah, in the beginning there was a logos. There is an eternal driving force behind the universe. But what John is about to do is he's about to take a truth that people were willing to accept and willing to believe and introduce them to someone that they could never dream of. That's why we have to talk about the identity of Jesus. See, that's the clue to Jesus, that there is this something out there that's driving us, that's making us pay attention, that we feel like there's this. There must be more than this. Greater things in heaven and earth, Horatio, that are dreamt of in heaven and earth than are in your philosophies. There's more out there than what you're just conceiving, and you know it. You know there's something. And John says, and the Word was with God, the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. So he says, in the beginning, yes, that Logos thing that you understand, there is some truth to that. But it was with God at the beginning, and here's the truth, it is God. Now, this is important because it's very easy to say, oh yeah, the Logos is God, no, and God is the Logos. No, this thing that you think you know is somebody that you have yet to meet, John is saying. You only know a little bit of it. You only get a sense of it. You only have a slice of it. But there is more because it's not just a thing, it is a person. You're not just going to tap into the divine whateverness out there and just hope that it all comes true. And if I'm just one with the universe, or I can enter in, or other religious teachings that say, well, if I can just transcend and enter into the greater consciousness that's vague and ambiguous and doesn't mean anything. Christianity's not inviting you to experience any of that. Christianity wants you to meet someone. And that someone is the driving power behind the universe. That person wants you here. That person wants to sustain you and move you and give you life and animate you and give you purpose and meaning. It's a person. It's not just some abstract thing. And I know so many of us say, why does this matter? How can I even know? Because I told you to circle that verse, John 1:14. Because John said, and then in the beginning was the Logos. You're kind of right. And the Logos was with God as we understand him, the biblical God, John said, that I'm about to teach you about. And the Logos is the biblical God of the Jews. He is the biblical God of the Hebrews. He is the biblical God of the Christians. I'm about to teach you that. And then in John 1:14, he jumps down and says, and then the Logos became flesh and dwelt among us. See, that power that you're looking for, that abstract reality that's just sort of floating out there, that you're hoping that I send my things out to the universe and hopefully the universe will send good things back to me. I'm just putting positive vibes out there and I hope positive vibes will come out to me. I'm manifesting my own creation. I'm determining life as I see it. Like we say all this stuff, but let me tell you something. When I do that and I don't know who's on the other side, I'm just trying to reply to a no reply email. But what I'm really doing is there is someone out there who is listening to me. There is someone out there who cares. And John just doesn't say he's out there. He said he became flesh and lived like one of us. And I'm about to, John says, tell you his story. Think about that. That thing that animates and drives us and pushes us and moves us forward, and we want it to be good. We hope it's benevolent. We hope it's kind. We hope that it's awesome. We hope all these things. But let me tell you something. Whatever you think God is, whoever you think God is, know that it doesn't compare to who he really is. See, they thought that the Logos was just this big, impersonal, binding force that kind of kept the universe going. They didn't know that it would become a man who laughed and cried and healed and walked and ate and slept and made friends and who prayed on behalf of his friends. They thought that the Logos was just this big, cold, impersonal concept that just floated out that barely even Aristotle or Philo or Socrates could barely even explain. They didn't know that that word would one day hang on a cross to die for their sins. And John says, let me tell you who the Logos really is. And friend, you may be here today, you may be watching online, you may think, I sort of believe in something. And I'm telling you, whatever the something is, it's nowhere near as great as who Jesus really is. So I encourage you, keep going. Keep going. Is this thing, whatever the thing is, for the Greek audience, it was the Logos, is this thing, could God be on the other side of it? Not is it a replacement for God, not is it instead of God, but it is a way of finding the truth of Jesus Christ. Who is God to you? Now, we can get lost in philosophy and theology and all the nuance, and that's what the podcast is for, that you can subscribe to by texting 87847, texting the word podcast right now. 87847. Oh, no, someone said shameless plug. Oh, yeah. It was as shameless as it gets. Brother, you haven't even seen Shameless. I'll tell you that much right now. That's what that's for, but for right now, you have to ask the question, so who cares? I mean, honestly, Brian, that's really kind of weird. I thought it said logos, to be honest with you. I was a little confused. And then my kid was like, why are we talking about Legos in church today? Like, this doesn't matter to me because I have a job, Brian. You get to think about this stuff. I have to go to the docks tomorrow morning. I have to work at the port. I got to make sure that house gets built. I have to get the kids off to school. This is all well and good. And I'm glad you think about this. I'm glad we have someone around here who thinks of stuff. But some of us have to go and live a real life. And let me tell you something, there's nothing more real than figuring out who put you here. Because when you know who put you here, you can start to ask the question, why am I here to begin with? And how can I do that? And that's done through the work of Jesus. Through the work of Jesus. John 1:3-4 says this, through him all things were made, without him nothing was made that has been made. It's a pretty tight logic circle there. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. This is actually very similar to what Philo taught, Philo the Jewish philosopher taught, but the difference is the connection that John makes to the word becoming flesh. And what we see are two critical truths embedded in this chapter, in this particular verse. Number one, everything comes from Jesus. Right? Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. If you've been made, that means Jesus was involved. And if you are here, it's because Jesus wants you here. And I don't even just mean here, I mean like existentially, metaphysically here. If you exist, it's because as Christians we believe Jesus wants you to exist. And if the second we believe that we say Jesus wants you to exist, the immediate question after that is actually going to be, well then why does he want me to exist? Or what does he want me to do? And now how you get your kids to school every morning and the energy and how I behave, how I do it, because I have to drive my daughter to the bus stop, how I get involved absolutely starts to matter. How I do business, how you show up to work, what you put in your body, what you don't put into your body, how you spend your money, how you talk to other people online, it absolutely works because it means you have a purpose because everything comes from Jesus. And now the second truth is that, and then everything is sustained by Jesus. Jesus keeps us going. How can I ever keep going? Jesus. Everything comes from Jesus and everything's sustained by Jesus. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. So whatever it is that you're facing, whatever it is that you're doing, even if you think that I don't think I could make another day, some of you have been there. Some of us have been there, where you just don't have enough energy, you don't have anything left in the tank. How could I possibly face tomorrow? I can't even get through the end of this day. Let me tell you something. In him and through him is what the Bible says. Colossians, Paul would write this later. Actually, earlier than this, Paul writes this. He says in Colossians chapter 1, verse 16 and 17, "For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together." Some of you feel right now like you're coming apart at the seams, that your body's unraveling, that your mind's unraveling, that your spirit's unraveling, that your marriage is unraveling, that your circumstances unraveling, that your job is unraveling, that your finances are unraveling. And I'm here to tell you that the Logos, who not only was with God, but is God, and who made all things, and then became flesh and walked among us, he is also the one that holds all things together, even you. And you're like, I'm shattered and I'm broken and I feel like 1,000 pieces. And Jesus is saying, I can hold all of those together. And before him, he is before all things. He's the first one. He's the top. He's the best. And he doesn't just sit up there and say, look how great I am. He steps down and he says, I am going to put you back together. I am going to heal this marriage. I'm going to heal these finances. I'm going to heal your body. I'm going to heal your mind. And it's not just a story. It is the creative, driving, animated person behind the universe that is doing this. Well, how can we know this, Brian? What do we do? It feels like we're losing. Well, that's the fourth thing I want to talk about. It's this. It's the triumph of Jesus. The light shines in the darkness, verse 5, and the darkness has not overcome it. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Jesus actually will echo this later on in his life when we get to the later chapters when he's praying and he says, do not have fear. Do not fear the world, he says, for I have overcome the world. One of the great themes in John, as you read through it multiple times, will be the idea of overcoming, of light over darkness. And we think, by the way, that darkness is really powerful. Do you understand that darkness is no more powerful than a match? Think of the weakest, slightest bit of light. You know, we were living in the South. I grew up in the South. And we don't have them as much out here, but we have them all over the place back when I was a kid. And they're just fireflies. There's fireflies everywhere. And they're miracles of wonder, by the way. There's light without heat. There's like all these things about fireflies that are absolutely amazing. But the fact that a little firefly can push out the darkness in a room. And we tend to think that the darkness around us is so terrifying. Oh, the darkness of this particular demographic. Oh, the darkness of this people group. You know how they are. They want to take over our country. Or the darkness of, oh, if that person gets elected, the country will descend into darkness. Or if that person doesn't get elected, this country will descend into darkness. Sounds to me like we're going to descend into darkness no matter what. But, or if you know, or, oh, no, man, if I don't get this job, my life's going to descend into darkness. Or if I can't get this one guy to really like me, I'll do whatever it takes. I'm going to descend into darkness. Oh, man, if I don't have that drink in my life's going to descend into darkness. And I'm going to tell you this. The light has come into the darkness, and the darkness can't overcome it. See, we think the light is so big, or the darkness is so big. We think the darkness is so powerful. We think the darkness can just snuff out the light, but I'm here to tell you that there is a light that will never go out. And I want you to know that. There is a light that will never go out. I want you to know that. I want my family to know that there is a light that will never go out. I want your friends and your family to know that there is a light that will never go out. that no matter how dark things seem, there is a light that will never go out. I think of the very obscure story from J.R. Tolkien. And there's a moment where this great human warrior is defending this pass against the evilness of the orcs and, all that kind of goofy, nerdy stuff that I love and you can hear about on Theology Threads. Text podcast to 87847. It's a story of Hurin Humbar. And he's standing at the pass to Gondolin, keeping these out, and he sends everyone else to win. And he picks up his axe as he's being overwhelmed with all the orcs and the wickedness and the evil of this world, and he takes that axe, and Tolkien writes it, he says, he swung it 70 times, and 70 times he said, day will come again. Day will come again. There is a light that never goes out. And I want to ask you, what are you facing? I want to ask you, what is it you're looking at? I want to ask you, what darkness is overwhelming your soul? And whatever it is, I get it, and it's horrible, and it's tragic, and I'm sure it's far more horrible and tragic than anything I've ever faced, because I've had a pretty decent life. But I'm telling you, my Christian brother and sister, there is a light that will never go out. And that light is the life of men, which means if that light doesn't go out, then our life can go on forever. It's not the end. In fact, so much that light invaded the darkness and brought all of heaven with him. The armies of heaven come down, and when they show up, you say, oh, they show up when Elijah prayed, like in Moonshot. They show up when Jesus walked the earth and he healed the sick. They show up when Moses parted the Red Sea. No, they show up when you are praying over your kids and saying, please, God, don't let the devil take them. That's when heaven is on earth. When you're mourning over the loss of a loved one, that's when heaven is on earth. When you're stressed over your finances and your job situation, that's when heaven is on earth, because the light has come and darkness of any scale cannot overcome it. There is a light that will never go out. And I want to ask you if you've let that light into your heart. I want to ask you if you've embraced that. I want to ask you, do you know this thing that you felt in the universe that's out there, that's big and huge and massive, that's been calling to you? I'm here to tell you, my friends, that thing is not a thing. It's a someone, and his name is Jesus. Would you bow your heads with me this morning? Heavenly Father, thank you for your grace and mercy. Thank you for your love. We thank you for your goodness. And now, with every head bowed and every eye closed, I just want to ask if you'd say, today, Brian, I've never allowed Jesus to become the light of my life. I've never placed him in charge. I've never said, you are Lord and I'm not. Or maybe I have. Maybe you have, but you've let the light of Jesus, you've put it into a corner. You've like the children's song, you've hid it under a bushel. You've let things hide it. But let me tell you something, that light can never be snuffed out. It can never be blown out. It's still there. And you say, today, Brian, maybe for the first time, or maybe just for the next time, maybe even just this time, I want the light of Jesus to flood my soul. I want to know him. I want to accept him. I want to see that he's been working in my life, that he is control and I'm not. If that's you, whether online at one of our campuses or in the room with me today, if you would like to make that declaration and make that step and make that decision, the way we do it at New Life is simply this. Would you stand today? Would you stand and say, today's the day that I thank you, friend. Thank you. Thank you. Today's the day that I want to declare that Jesus is the light of my life. I'm going to let him guide me. I'm going to let him speak to me. I'm going to quit trying to be my own center, my own destiny, my own maker, and I'm going to accept the fact that he has made me. Is there anyone across all of our campuses, anyone watching online? Thank you, friend. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? Thank you. Thank you, friend. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else today? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to thank you and applaud you and say, good choice today for making this decision. We want to celebrate with you. And now I want to invite all of us to stand, because we all need to acknowledge that Jesus is the light of our lives. And repeat after me these words. Dear Lord Jesus, you are God and I am not. You are the King and I am your servant. Forgive me because I'm a sinner. I believe, help my unbelief, and help me live for you as you show me how. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Come on, New Life, let's continue to worship together this morning.